if your strategy for your project as an asset owner is longevity over a 30, 40, 50 years life cycle, well, then the implementation of your sustainability strategy fits into that. And it's not just about getting a return on investment in 2 years. It's about over the entire life cycle. And the legislation with LCA will help that, and LCC as well with life cycle costing is hugely important. But on to the next point here. This next one is interesting for me anyway, at least. Do we really understand where the value is? And what I mean by that is sustainability being a big word, and it's pushed on every project now, and it's every company, including ourselves, are behind this sustainability drive, if you like. But we're kind of making decisions from a sustainability perspective, but do we really understand where the value is in terms of sustainability? We talk about material selection. Is that really the value is? Is the value much greater than just the material selection or the LCA calculation?
I think, as Archie mentioned before, is also the risk on not doing it. Yeah. Like ending up with a stranded asset. Yeah. People, if you look at energy certificates on buildings, people want the A or B, so it's as a minimum. So it's kind of visible for the owners. I think you can end up with the same as a building owner if you haven't thought about, if you building what you would call a dinosaur, just an old traditional concrete building. People 5 to 10 years from now will just see it as a dinosaur building.
Yeah, like a diesel engine almost car, which are beginning to be faded out, right? Where diesel engines will stop soon, and the combustion engine for diesel will stop, especially in the cars. But it's the principle is the same. It's not about is it expensive now. It's about really, well, what's going to be in 5-10 years time? What's going to be the norm then? And is your building going to become stranded? But very shortly there, Archie, explain what stranded means there to our listeners when we talk about building assets or buildings or assets becoming stranded from a sustainability perspective.
Yeah, sure. So you have this idea that each country and each sector has a fair share of the remaining carbon budget. So the carbon budget is, if we're not to exceed 1.5 degrees of warming, then there's only a certain amount of carbon that can be emitted into the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases. So what they will say is, in Ireland, your share of that remaining carbon budget is X, and the construction industry is 30% of that X. So that sets a kind of a dropping carbon ceiling that every year starts to decrease. Now, your building will have a carbon footprint, and the fair share that your building can emit can be plotted. Your building can be plotted against its fair share, and it has to stick within that, or else it falls outside of the regulatory boundaries. What that means is, let's say the ceiling for that building is like Denmark. It's set as an annual budget of 15 kilograms per meter squared, and you exceed that. Well, then, can you increase the rent on that building, or will that extra carbon, will that be taxed as a high level of carbon tax? So what we're trying to do with buildings is make sure that they, first of all, understand where is the point where they exceed their fair share of carbon, and then try and look at what are the best fit solutions to try and decarbonize. Someone explained it as, it's like an Indiana Jones movie where, the ceiling and the walls are coming in and you're trying to avoid that. So, as we go down this tunnel towards 2050 or even towards 2030, you will see certain assets, that will start to
go outside that line, and that's what we mean by when it becomes stranded. It's no longer an asset that sits inside the parameters; it sits outside. So the asset owners then will need to put a strategy in place for bringing that asset back inside the line over the next number of years. It's an interesting one. It's the same as what we do with cost. We index cost from today's rate right through to the future, which is up until, well, whenever the building is contracted to the contractor or whenever the building is complete. We predict where we believe the cost to go. So we also need to predict where we believe carbon to go for our clients for that project, to future-proof it from a carbon perspective, but future-proof it from a cost perspective also. So really, to answer the question here, do we really understand where the value is? The value is you need to do something right now, because if you're not doing anything, you're already going to be stranded in the next number of years for your projects. So sustainability suddenly becomes front and center of your strategy for your project.